don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to keep it very concise today. 2 different ways of approaching transmutation of one's emotions. We see that some circumstance seems to cause a challenging emotion to arise. That emotion manifests as a physical feeling somewhere in our bodies, often around our forehead, our solar plexus, or our gut. And a set of stories that we create in our mind and then reinforce through continuously giving our attention to them. The conventional way of trying to deal with life's obstacles is by solving the problem. So for instance, if I miss the bus, then my first instinct is to panic, text 3 of my friends asking for a ride. Whereas transmutation encourages us to pause for a minute. Not to say that the problem can't be solved, but to simply take a step back first and allow all of the energy that circumstance has catalyzed within us to flow and to be processed prior to making our move. And it's important to understand that you always will make your move. Even if there is a genuine issue that you have to respond to in your life, pausing for a few minutes before you take that first step is not something that you need to be afraid of. So often I feel like a problem arises and then we have this incredible instinct to want to immediately squash it and fix it and get rid of it. And it's like often by getting rid of one problem, we reinforce 3 others because we approach the problem with such a hastened and frantic energy that we end up being sloppy, we make mistakes, or we simply drive more anxious energy into our being, which challenges our ability to then show up to the world authentically after. So instead of trying to solve a problem by simply fixing the external issue at hand, the seeming cause of the problem, transmutation encourages us to look within and to experience the direct energetic feeling of that problem on its own terms prior to making any action. And there's 2 sort of different ways that I like to explain the approach to transmutation. There's sort of a focused approach to transmutation and a broad approach to transmutation. And I'll start with the focused. So some situation arises, you drop an ice cream cone on the ground and now you're super upset. You can feel that anger, that self-pity like welling up in your being, right? Instead of trying to distract yourself from that feeling, or instead of reinforcing this story that this feeling is causing you harm and creating suffering, the focused method of transmutation encourages us to sit with the feeling as directly and intimately as we can. Put your attention on the physical sensation of the feeling itself. Feel every intricate movement as the energy passes through your solar plexus to your gut, up and down your spine. And then consciously send love to that energy. Tell yourself that you're grateful for that experience. Tell yourself that you embrace that energy, that you want to see that energy for what it is. And if you'd like, subtly hold the energy a little bit. Put your attention on it and then almost kind of grab it with your internal hand and keep it there for a second. And I mention this part because a lot of people seem to approach transmutation with this idea that if I can successfully transmute energy, then all my suffering is going to go away and I'm going to be happy. And even though there is a truth to that, transmutation ultimately is for the purpose of seeing through suffering itself. Trying to see through suffering by trying to see through suffering doesn't really work, because trying to see through suffering reinforces that there is this solid thing called suffering that through some great inner effort we need to overcome or see through. And so by holding that seemingly painful emotion and then also choosing to drop the label of that emotion as painful or as difficult or even as something that you must transmute, it's almost as if you're telling your body that this emotion is wanted, that this emotion is welcome in the system, that this emotion is not making you suffer because you see yourself as a fully sovereign being that is not able to be touched by the transient whims of temporary, fleeting emotions. And so you hold on to this energy without any agenda to eliminate it or for it to change. And then by holding on to this energy, you find that you sink into this deeper spaciousness. This perspective seems to develop and is often accompanied by much kinder, much more enjoyable mental stories. Because by holding your attention on that energy and by giving love to that energy, you've given that energy the ability to move through your system, to be processed and seen, and as such released. Conversely, there is the broad approach to transmutation. If the focused approach to transmutation is all about pinpointing your attention like a laser on the physical sensation of the emotion itself, the broad approach to transmutation is more so focused on seeing the energy as one part of a holistic picture. Seeing that not only are you a fully sovereign being who doesn't need to be touched so intensely by this energy, but also seeing that the very mental impulse to sort of think that this problem is everything. I need to solve this problem before I can move on to my day. I need to solve this problem or else I can't be happy. It's just one little dot of this whole mosaic of life. And so practically what the broad approach to transmutation manifests as is a conscious shifting of your attention. And notice how attention keeps on coming up over and over again here. A conscious shifting of your attention from the stories that seem to substantiate and validate your suffering to something that is direct and immediate to your experience. And if you watch my satsangs, then you know that for this I often recommend the breath, because the breath is an incredibly neutral action. It's morally neutral. In a sense, it's physically neutral. It's something that your body can rely on as this stable point within itself because it's a rhythm that it repeats for the rest of its life. Feel the air flowing through your nose and mouth. Feel the rise and fall of your chest. Listen to the subtle caress of the breath in your mouth. Allow your attention to move to all of these subtle physical manifestations. Allow yourself to see your sights as just sights. Touch something warm, something cold, something with texture. Feel that texture on your fingers. Lean into the intelligence of your body to fully understand in that moment how that challenging emotion ought to be addressed. And indeed, addressing challenging emotions often involves turning an eye away from it, not necessarily ignoring the emotion or pretending it doesn't exist, but rather consciously recognizing that there is so much more to be seen and experienced in reality, and that experience of reality, and hence the processing of those emotions that you crave to accomplish, is right at your fingertips and is simply about a change of perspective that is ultimately effortless, right? And when I say that change of perspective is effortless, it's not to say that suffering doesn't seem to create tension in the body. And it's not to say that there's no need for practice, right? I just made a whole video about transmutation. But it is to say that the more that you are willing to be honest with yourself about your suffering, the more you see that all your suffering is a feedback loop that you reinforce in your mind, because deep down there is a belief that you need to reinforce that feedback loop to get something out of life or to avoid something that you think life is going to force on you. The more that you are able to transmute energy, either by holding it a little bit, consciously sending love to it, or seeing it as one little brushstroke in this giant painting of life, this big kaleidoscope as I've talked about before, the more you seem to cleanse the system of all of these little fear-based neuron connections in the body. The more the emotional tripwire of the solar plexus, which is filled with all of these little connections based on scarcity and lack and doubt, the more those connections are pruned from the body, because those connections are no longer substantiated by the false belief that there's something meaningful about them, that there's something actually serious about them other than the power that you choose to give them. So don't despair. And don't think that this needs to be a heavy process where you have to always figure out the origin and the destination of every emotion. Don't even think that you're trying to get anywhere. Don't think that you need to eliminate the emotion. Ask yourself the question, if I felt this feeling for the rest of my life, could I be fulfilled? And return to that question again and again and again, and until the answer to that question is an emphatic yes. Keep looking.